And you believe actors are entrepreneurs.
I do, because if you think about it, you know, you're in charge of your own research, you're in charge of your own budgeting, you're in charge of your time. I mean, that's just such a huge part of it. You're in charge of your own marketing, your own branding, you know, websites if you're doing that, community building, reach out, all of those things that entrepreneurs do, that can be really, really hard.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Cinematography for Actors podcast. I'm Indiana. Haley is here.
We are so stoked to have in the studio today someone, you know her from television, you know her from Broadway, you know her from all kinds of walks of life. She's a philosopher.
All the 50 plus countries she's been to, right?
All over the world.
Monica McCarthy.
It's Monica McCarthy.
Hi. Welcome.
Thank you.
You're looking amazing today, as always, actually.
Beautiful.
Since the moment we met you, I was like, glam, this is amazing.
Oh my gosh, it's all a ruse. Believe you.
No,
me.
I was literally looking at a blowout membership yesterday because I was like, maybe I need to start getting like these because you do this yourself probably, right? But
I do, but I went through a phase where I was like, actually when I had a live podcast event thing, which we'll probably talk about, but I had this thing where it was almost like a luck or a curse kind of thing where I was like, I have to get it blown out like before, because I'd get so stressed, and it does take a long time, you know, and so I was like, okay, I'm gonna go
in the chair,
and
you're like
they give you a little champagne,
massaging your hair.
High worth choices.
Yeah,
I love that.
Self-care.
Yeah.
But no, now I was doing it on my own.
So Monica, we're so happy to have you here today because since the moment we met, which was maybe 2 weeks ago now.
2 weeks, 2 years.
Yeah.
You know?
Who knows
It's
at this
all the
point?
same. Time.
We're in complete alignment. We feel like we've known you for a lot longer. And I think there's a lot of great pieces that you can bring to this puzzle of what we are talking about a lot of the time. So with actors and filmmakers, so welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. And also, I mean, when I met you, you did bring to this party like bread that you just baked and butter that you had made, like churned by hand, and cheese. And I was like, these are going to be my best friends.
I know. Yeah, I know. This was, and all of it, I just have to say, because I'm so proud of us for doing it, we did it in an hour.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
I thought when Indiana first said, she was like, I'm doing a butter board and I want to make the butter, I was like, girl, good luck. Like, that's going to take forever. And then she was like, come over, we're going to do it. And I was like, you haven't started yet?
But Haley's like the one that had to do it. I was like, I don't want to shake it. My arm's tired. And so Haley's in my living
jars
room
for 40 minutes.
She was singing to my cat at one point while like shaking this jar. It was amazing.
But it is surprisingly very easy to make mozzarella cheese. So easy.
Yeah.
Like
very
the fact
important
that we're buying it is
ridiculous.
Not sane.
Took
to
us
me
under
anymore.
20 minutes. So
It was so easy.
I know.
That's amazing. No, I mean, I'm the one that brought. I kept calling them artisanal donuts because it was from like an artisanal donut place. Yeah, but it felt very important to to know that this was not like
this isn't just a regular
Dunkin'.
No offense against Dunkin'.
No, it is very important that you say that. I would do the exact same, especially if I spent the money on those donuts. I would be like, everyone should be sampling these. Like these are like I had to drive for these.
Folded the sidecar box up so everyone could see that.
It's a flex. If you bring sidecar, it's a flex.
That's true.
In LA, it is absolutely a flex. Welcome back to LA.
Yeah, I mean, after almost 2 decades away, it's pretty crazy.
Where were you?
Well, I was living in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would come back, but it was, my whole dream was always to be bi-coastal. In my email, there's like NYLA, which confuses people, but it's actually much harder to do in practice than in reality, I find.
To be bi-coastal.
Yeah. If you literally don't have, a home in each place, there's a lot I could say about that, about also like community or dating or, not that I know a lot about that, but, so many things where to actually have your foot in a couple places is hard. And then when you also, you've got family somewhere that's in another place, and then, you also have sort of a travel addiction. I don't know.
I feel that I'm missing it so much. This year is all about like saving as much money as I possibly can so that I can get back into travel mode. Because it fed me so much creatively, as well as, and I always say this to people as a DP, I'm like, my travel opened me to the idea of telling stories you don't see on screen all the time, because you're meeting people that will never have that opportunity or may never have something written that they could relate to. And so why not use that knowledge and work with people so that what we're putting on the screen is telling that new story. So that's such an important thing.
Definitely. There was a period where I was like, I'm going to be a travel writer, have a travel show.
Yeah.
I had like a whole thing for it, face to place. And I actually started doing it I remember because it was when I was a stand-in on a show called Pan Am, funny enough. Mm-hmm. It was a short-lived show, about airline stewardesses. And it was this funny thing where it would be like Monday through for some reason I feel like we had Fridays off, but it would be like Mondays through Thursdays I'd be sitting in a fake airplane wearing a stewardess costume oftentimes, and then Fridays through Sundays I would go fly. For some reason I was like, every month I'm going to go to a new state and to a new country.
Good for you.
And I would come, but it would be like super fast, and I would have reached out to some people to to interview them, and then the premise was like then they would each recommend somebody for me while I was there to reach out to. So I was seeing it through their eyes. Yeah, it was a little bit crazy, but that was
You're making the world a smaller place, which I like. It's like the Marshall McLuhan, like the world becoming a global village.
Yeah.
And so that's what you were doing. You're manifesting that for everyone. I love that.
Me and the internet.
Yeah. Where are you from?
I was born and raised in Orange County.
Okay, cool.
California.
Awesome.
I guess there's one in Florida. Very different. And then I went to Pepperdine for undergrad in Malibu, just up the road, I guess.
Yeah.
And then I lived in Santa Monica for a year.
Okay.
That's when I got my side card. And then I booked a job in Japan for a year, but I'd always wanted to live in New York City. Like I visited in 5th grade, saw Cats in the front row. I was like, this is my jam. I was musical theater. I was super blonde. It was like very much my thing.
Love that.
And so then I was in New York City after that.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember like as you were kind of talking about what we might want to discuss on the podcast and you started to like send us this brain dump, I was like, how do we tackle all of this? Because there's so many aspects that could be relevant to an audience here. And so I think we're going to be touching on a lot of cool stuff today, everyone. But yeah, okay. I actually am, as like a fellow traveler, I would like to say, I would love to hear about this Japan thing.
Yes.
Sure.
Singing in Japan. Is that what
that was never on my like list of things that I expected. I mean, so the first time that I got, like, we were not a traveling family, growing up. There was that trip in 5th grade that was really, influential on me, but otherwise, no. And then in college, we had the study abroad programs at Pepperdine were really strong, I will say that. And so they had one in Heidelberg, Germany, that was quite popular because it's so central in Europe that you could also get on a train, overnight train any Thursday night. We had Fridays off, and then, be anywhere. And so that actually was after my freshman year, I think I did that, something crazy like that. And I was like, this is the best. And that's when I started getting really into like art history and literature, because we would, study the paintings at the Uffizi and then, go and see them. And I was like, this is the best.
I know.
And it had nothing to do with theater. So that was also really interesting for me. And then there was the theater program every other year. They did a study abroad program in London, and then you'd perform in the Edinburgh Festival.
Beautiful.
In Scotland.
Beautiful.
So that was my first sort of intro.
Cool.
Yeah. And I was very, very obsessed, and I took out a gazillion loans to go do those things.
Of course, yeah.
And so, but then I was just so focused on career that I wasn't thinking about it. And ironically, I remember I was cocktail serving at this bar and in Santa Monica, and I had that day, it was like solid 9 hours of auditions, because it was, I had a final callback for a tour of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat and for this Japan gig on the same day.
Whoa.
And this was like, they were in Burbank. Oh my gosh. I mean, auditions are still intense, but this used to be like, you used to have to like wait in line to sign up. Whole other topic.
Everything was in person.
Yeah, everything was in person. And those were all singing and dancing auditions. And I remember that I was at the Japan audition for so long. So basically, sorry, I ramble a lot.
No, we have a podcast. It's okay to do that.
The Japan thing, essentially, to sort of like take a back step, is that the the economy in Japan had taken a huge hit. And so at one point they had developed, and this was like several decades ago, they developed these lands in Japan because the Japanese love to travel, but it's very expensive and difficult to get to and from Japan. So that's when they got like Disneyland there, but they also created a Spain land.
Wow.
Yeah, there's like a, I don't know, I think there's a Paris land. This was a place called Haustenbosch, and it was an exact replica of Utrecht in the Netherlands, like brick for brick. There were what do you call it with the windmill?
Yeah.
I was like Don Quixote. Yeah. There were windmills. There were people dressed up as tulips, and so they were a bank had bought it out to kind of bring it back to life.
People were dressed up as tulips?
Well, yeah, like at characters, like how Disneyland, you know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
They got enough people to sit there and just look like tulips. Yeah, I was like, oh,
I mean, anything is possible.
Meet a tulip one.
Yeah, exactly.
So they brought in, choreographers and things like that and directors to put together these shows. And so I was hired. You were either singer track or dancer track. So I was hired as a singer, and it was wild. It was 6 days a week for a year. And multiple shows a day. It was singing. We were with like a 26-piece big band is what they call it. So it don't mean a thing if it didn't go that swing, that kind of music. We also had a Beatles medley tribute, I remember. Yeah, it was a wild time. But that was what enabled me to, save up because you weren't paying rent, you had a salary. Right. You didn't have time to really spend on anything. So,
how would you heard about this?
I'm sure it was like, backstage or
wow,
something like that. Yeah, it was an open call. I don't think I had reps at the time or anything. Yeah. And so I just remember that I was at the bar cocktail serving, and I got the call about Joseph that I booked the tour. And that was actually crazy because I was at the Japan audition for so long that I was late to the callback. So I race and everybody's gone except for they're literally packing up. It's like you see in the movies,
you're like, wait,
and I'm like, wait, please give me my shot. And so he literally was like, okay, 5, 6, 7, 8, and like showed me like a dance, and then I did that, and then I like sang, and then got the call that
oh my god,
a montage in a 90s film.
It really 100% was 100% was. So it was so surreal to be like, get that, and then I was like, yes, I'm in. And then within an hour, probably 30 minutes or something, I got the call that I got the Japan gig, and they conflicted. God. Yeah. So that, and like at the bar, it was just a lot of things happening at one time. And so anyways, I think it's really, I do think it's one of those sliding door moments where you're like, what would life have been like if I hadn't, gone down that route? So, yeah.
Wow.
So 6 days a week, how are you taking care of your voice?
I don't know that we were doing a great job of it because also we were, emotionally, it was a lot. I mean, for a lot of reasons, but there was, definitely too much like heavy drinking and things like that. But how were we taking care of our voice? I mean, it was, doing the warm-ups every day. Mm-hmm. And when you're singing, there is something about when you're doing the same material over and over and over again, it does become a bit of muscle memory.
Yeah.
As well. Yeah. And things were sort of, it was funny because it was like, for if we have any like singers in the audience, it was like I had this annoying voice where it was like I did not have a strong mix. It's like Ping, Sutton Foster kind of voice that became very popular.
Yeah.
When I was getting out of school, I was much more of like sort of the classical. I had a very, this like kind of strong soprano, and then I had this sultry belt kind of thing, and so there was no middle ground. So so it worked. That sound music just kind of fit.
Came kind of naturally.
Yeah.
Cool.
But I, would I say that we were amazing
taking care of that voice?
Probably not. Yeah. Also, we were so young,
Yeah, and it's like a land. Like people come through and they're like, "Oh, that's nice," and then they keep going. So you can kind of be like, "It's all right."
Yeah. We definitely had each other to lean on.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I have so many questions. What was your decision-making process between Joseph and Japan?
It really came down to one felt more of like a once in a lifetime opportunity, and which at the time we didn't know anything about. Well, there were people who did. I didn't know anything about like the Enneagram, for example, or like a lot. I didn't have a therapist. Like there wasn't a lot of sort of like the self-awareness stuff and tools that we have now. But it's interesting looking back. That is how I make a lot of decisions still. Of like, do I feel like this opportunity is probably not going to happen anytime soon? Versus like a tour of a musical that, it's not the first tour it's existed, and it was interesting though, because that one would have been more recognizable on my resume, It was also a shorter contract. Like there's a lot of like business decisions that would have made more sense with that. It was also interesting because I was like newly in a relationship to somebody that I became engaged to years later. Then called off the wedding, and that's a whole other story.
It is. But I have it highlighted here to talk about.
Yeah, great. But I will say, like, it was pretty great that he was like, "Well, you've got to go to Japan," you know, like,
right.
you know.
Supportive.
So that was
stuff
really
can
cool.
change your life, man. Like being in a relationship where you're not. That's why it's so important to surround yourself with positive people and people who. It's always like that saying of, if you want to judge someone's success, look at the people they surround themselves with. And it's so true because you could have been in a relationship where that person's like, no, I would prefer, I prefer you don't go to Japan, you know, or like whatever that is. And that would have definitely changed your journey so much.
Well, that happened, flash forward 10 years later, and that is actually what happened.
Got it.
So yeah, it is interesting.
Wow. Yeah. So, okay, after Japan, you moved to New York, which was always the dream.
Always the dream.
How did it go? Was it worth it? Did it fulfill all of the expectations you had had for it?
I mean, again, New York City, back in the day, I just remember I moved in January with like 2 suitcases, sight unseen in the apartment.
Whoa.
Yeah, I didn't like the apartment. I didn't know my room had no windows. It was a whole thing. You know, all the things they say.
That's not a room. That's not a legal room. There's no egress.
Yeah.
Kelly, you live in a closet.
My room also doesn't have windows, but it does have a beautiful bar for coats.
I mean,
she sleeps under her coats, guys.
Whatever it takes. Yeah, I mean, it was, you know, it's sort of like it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Truly. I do definitely feel like, yes, I was born and raised in California, but I grew up in New York 100%. And I was lucky. I had friends, even a lot of my closest friends now today are from undergrad, interestingly enough, and a lot of them had moved to New York. So there was, you know, I did know people there, but it was very much focused on, I spent so much time at those open calls. And I learned really quickly, like, oh, it's not so easy here. Those days of the double callbacks. The biggest thing for me was that, like, I wasn't actually a trained dancer. I came to dance late. Like, my freshman year in college, I remember it was Guys and Dolls. And I was like, oh, I wonder if I'll be Sarah or if I'll be Adelaide. Like, you know, that was where like my mindset was going. And I was neither. And everyone had to do the dance call. And I ended up being, there was like 2 of us freshmen that were cast. And at the time I was like, oh, I can't believe I'm not one of the leads. And now I'm really close friends with some other people that were like, do you realize most of us didn't make it?
Right, like you were one of 2 freshmen.
Yeah, and the other dancers were dancers. And this was another thing that happened to me. And that's why that audition for Joseph is also crazy. What I've learned is I do really well under pressure. And if it's
that's great.
If it doesn't show certain steps, I've also almost been fired several times from shows, you know, because it was like, and they were, every time they were like, you danced so much better at the audition. And I was like, you didn't do these steps at the audition.
This is different than what I signed up for.
Yeah. And I had so many close calls. That was the thing. And that's the challenge I think that a lot of actors face, is when it's like, it's one thing if you're not getting any bites, but it's another thing when it's like, I mean, the number of callbacks for like Thoroughly Modern Millie or Legally Blonde or, you know, whatever. But the truth was, in hindsight, I mean, I wasn't a natural singer. I had to work at that really hard. And so anytime I felt off or, you know, like that, in hindsight, I'm like, oh man, I wish I had just like read the room and been like, these girls can sing their face like off in the middle of the night. And then dancing, it was like the same thing. It was like, you know, that's great that there was like a certain natural ability, but I got to it too late in many degrees, you know. So it was like, it really does separate out, and it took me a while to figure out that what I loved really was acting, and that my strength, the reason why I made it so far in those calls was really not my singing or dancing abilities. It was the acting.
Strong acting.
But I didn't, it was just never, something. Not that I didn't want to be an actor, but it just felt like at the time, again, there was none of these streaming shows. In New York, it was like there was a couple of soaps, there was Law and Order, and there was theater, you know? And so it just felt very far away. And so the fact that, you know, the Broadway debut ended up being this drama ended up being very shocking to me.
But still, like, very incredible and something to be celebrated that you're saying, I came to it late and I wasn't a trained dancer. And you still did it. Like, there's so many people who are like, well, I didn't learn how to do that. And you were like, whatever. But you did it anyway. Do it anyway, guys.
That's sort of my motto, I think. Do it anyway. Yeah. Try all the things. That's why the brain dump is always like, people are like, what? It's your life.
Great.
And I'm like, oh.
No, I love it. I'm like looking here. And so once you did get engaged to that, to your partner at the time, were you acting and you had a video production company?
Yeah. So what happened was, let's see. So he ended up moving out to New York later. And then I'm like trying to think of the order of things. So I just remember that when I was doing the show, I was an understudy. So I had a lot of time backstage or literally the dressing room was underneath the Broadway stage, which does a lot for your emotional mentality.
You're like, oh, we're up there.
Yeah, you literally hear them upstairs. But I got certified at the time as a holistic health coach. There was sort of this rise of entrepreneurism at the time. That again, there's so many things that we sort of like take for granted now, but that was very new at the time. Location independence, all of those things. And so I started becoming friends with a lot of other coaches, small business owners, all of that. And
That's great.
So so then some of them started coming to me for coaching on public speaking, being on camera, being on stage, etc. And then my fiance at the time, he was a video editor.
Okay.
And so we had an edit bay in our apartment.
Of course, as you do. Yeah.
And so the idea was, okay, well, what if we create this little, video production company that can help these entrepreneurs and small business owners and nonprofits and all of that tell their story. And so it was called Show and Tell Stories Productions. And it was a lot of the, sort of sharing your story. I'd help them craft the story. I would often be interviewing them. I'd be off camera, and then we would, cut to B-roll footage that we would take of them in their, their bakery or whatever it was. And then there were some other things like commercial and things like that. So it was the first time I got to try directing, which is funny because again, then it was another many years before I went back to taking that seriously.
Yeah.
In narrative, but. Yeah.
Were you seeing it as directing or were you seeing it as just getting the job done?
That's a great question. I think I would say I always knew I didn't want to have a business per se, but I think that actually took a while to figure out. I think that not everybody's meant to be an entrepreneur. Not everybody's meant to have a business. I think I'm meant to have neither in many ways, although I do think that being an actor or cinematographer, whatever it is, you are an entrepreneur in many ways. Yeah. But in terms of having to run the business part was definitely my least favorite. I wasn't thinking it in I remember one time I came home from directing something and he had drawn this picture of me that I still have, and it was it said Monica, and I had the director, whatever, this megaphone kind of thing. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. That is what I'm doing,
Yeah. It puts it into perspective through someone else's eyes because you're like, oh, it just feels so natural to me.
Yeah.
But then when you actually look at the roles or look at what you're doing, you're like, oh, wait, I'm totally identifying as giving those notes and directing this piece.
And I guess I just wasn't thinking of it in terms of oh, well, that was a shot list, or oh, this was me when I worked with the client, coming up with the story,
organic.
Or it just was I don't know, putting the pieces together to make it happen. And it wasn't until again later when I went to go make my first short film that I was like, oh, this is what this is.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Wow. And then you have written down "Imploded My Life."
Let's talk about that.
Let's talk about that.
Did you eat, pray, love?
So I like to say I tried to eat, pray, love my life, but it didn't go the way it went for Liz Gilbert. Liz Gilbert, I love you.
Mm-hmm.
It did not work for me. So I was in that relationship, and it was just so crazy because it was just so intertwined in so many ways. At that point, now you've got the business and we had a dog and all of that. But I mentioned that the health coaching stuff because I got very interested in that's when I started thinking about what can I do that isn't about me, that helps others, what is it? And I started down this journey of being does acting actually help anyone? Which we'll get back to because I do think it does. But at the time, my fiance at the time was getting very over my highs and lows because at that point there was just so many close calls. I remember us going to Maine and me having to literally turn around, get on a bus and go back for a legally long callback. So it was, it's not an easy task to be with somebody who is an actor or anybody or even has their own business. I would say there's a lot there. So yeah, I what I did was I went to Southeast Asia for 3 months, and trying to figure things out there. I mean, and we went on some trips too. Like it's that thing where the lesson for me really was, and oftentimes we see things as being so black and white, like it's so obvious a relationship is so bad you need to get out of it, which definitely also had that too.
Yeah.
But like so many of the things it's in life, it's actually about letting go of something that's good for something that's great. And so that was what I think I was really, really struggling with. And we'd met really young, we had really met my first year out of college. And so that, because I didn't have the tools then to do it and sort of like, let's work this out together. It was really like, whatever you need. You take the dog, you take the house. I don't know. I'll figure it out. I mean, I remember like sleeping on like a friend's couch for so long.
Eat, pray, loved that.
You did.
You're like, take it all.
Take it all.
You had that moment.
Yeah, take it all. And me like going through my own like dark night of the soul and stuff, which is again also like helpful from a storytelling perspective. I mean, I definitely wouldn't be able to be an actor the way I am now or tell stories the way that I do now without a lot of those experiences. I can look back and be like, oh, I was really safe for a long time and then really wasn't.
Haley, do you resonate with that?
Yeah. I mean, I am very lucky that I had a support system at the time when I decided to end it. But I think honestly, my dark night of the soul was getting married. Actually,
oh my God, Haley
was getting married and going and isolating myself. That's because nobody could save me.
No,
I was rejecting any kind of
feedback on the relationship.
Yes, any kind of.
She left Utah and moved to London with her partner, her husband at the time,
who was not a great person. And I think that was that, and that was years that I had to go through it, and then finally
get out of that.
Save myself.
Yeah.
But like,
how do you think
it wasn't good? It wasn't.
Yeah.
Good.
Do you think it shapes into now how you approach all of your stuff?
100%. It's how I approach myself as it's. I mean, this past year that we talked about me, like radical self-acceptance, like loving myself. That's something that I didn't know how to do, and would take years to figure out. But it all stems from that one decision.
Yeah. I remember talking with Monica at breakfast when we were all together, and we were talking about that idea of like the holistic actor or like the whole actor. And I've been thinking about that a lot because when we had Alex on the podcast, who we met through, she was talking about acting plus. And I'm loving that there are these ideologies coming around of like, how do we define beyond what that actor is to everybody else? Who are you? And so I want you to talk about this idea of the holistic actor and what that means to you, and that your ideas, it's just so, I think it's a beautiful concept to explore.
Oh, thanks. Well, also I just want to say like your story that it resonates. There's parts of the story that of mine that I don't share that came later. Someday I'll share my story. I'm actually like turning it into like a fictional thing to like kind of work through it.
Of course.
But yeah, just I guess the thing is like it will all. That's the best gift about being an artist is you can actually take your broken heart and turn it into art.
It all serves you in the end.
It really does. And so that's. Oh, makes me teary every time.
I know.
And that actually in some ways is the root of what I would say when I think about being a holistic actor. Like there's a lot of approaches to it. Like, right now there's a lot of talk about somatic work or mind body practices and all that. And that's amazing. And again, like none of that was kind of in the zeitgeist, or like I hear now actors talking about like Brene Brown or, and I'm like, awesome. Like again, kind of things that I feel like they sort of floated through the entrepreneurial world first and then became more, I don't know, through TED Talks or whatever, kind of became more in the public eye. And then it's really great to see that that's become more prevalent in the artistic community. Because when, for me, we were still very much stuck in the starving actress, the struggling actor mentality. And I mean, I could go on and on about how this all stems from romanticism and where this idea of like genius came from. And I love talking about this stuff. But the point is, it's like, those are all just ideas. It's not the reality of the situation. It's not how actors were always seen. It's not how artists were always seen. So, this idea of that it all matters, it all counts. And the reality is, for most of us, we're only acting that's such a small sliver of the pie of our time that we're actually doing.
Actually being on set and actually like performing.
Yeah. I mean, like, especially if you're theater, like unless you're on like a tour or something, most plays, like we'll take musicals out of the equation. A lot of the plays are like 3-month runs, maybe, you know? So, and then you're like back to square one again. Or if you are a co-star, you're on set for a day, or, you know, you're making your indie film, it's a couple of days, maybe a week. Like, so, you know, what are you doing the rest of your time? So there's the holistic actor for yourself, but there's also about how you can be, how it then makes your art better too, because I am so mystified about how acting training programs don't teach humanities and psychology and sociology and anthropology. Like I just like all
artists in general, I think need more of that. Yeah, absolutely.
It's truly bizarre to me. I'm very much a big fan of interdisciplinary learning. And the other thing that I had done when I was going through the dark night of the soul that ended up kind of serving me later was the other classes that I took in school that I really loved was we had something called the Great Books Colloquium.
Okay.
And it's essentially a minor in philosophy because it's 2 years of philosophy and you start with like Plato and Aristotle and you move your way up. And so those classes, they were structured with we had 11 people in the class. They're conversation based, you know, you learn the Socratic method, all of that. So I started hosting these philosophic dinner salons when I was like, what do I want to do with my life? And I just made sure that it was people from everybody did something different. Everybody had a different background because I was just so immersed in, first it was actors and it was entrepreneurs. And so, you know, one of the things we had talked about at the breakfast was like, I was saying how I just became so clear that then it's not innovative, you know? And so a lot of the challenges that I see with a lot of kind of like actor focused programs, for example, is like, it's just you and other actors.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's not actually that much, you're all kind of in the same boat, you know? That's why I love what you're creating is because there's just even that like creates so many opportunities.
Oh, that's what we love. Like just connecting people so that you can have that beyond conversation, the one you wouldn't have had access to.
Yeah.
And so that's once again in alignment here, folks. I love it.
Yeah. And I've done a few things. Like I had a project called Act 2 where I interviewed actors who had pivoted careers because I was so curious because the problem for me was that nothing ever really replaced it. Even when I spent many years as a professional, you call it kind of an impresario where I hosted and came up with workshops and talkbacks and interviewing people, you know, like Gretchen Rubin, et cetera, these sort of like thought leaders. But nothing replaced it. And the thing that I found was no one quits acting because they don't like acting. People, if they quit, it's because of the lifestyle that comes with it. And so I was interested in talking to people that were happy with their pivot.
Yeah.
And what I learned from that was that, oh my gosh, nobody asks an actor why they want to be an actor. And so there's actually a gazillion different answers for it. So I had a friend who he quit because he realized he just loved performing. He likes being this, you know, in center stage. He's literally a professional speaker. He's been on Shark Tank. Like it makes so much sense that that's a track that he went down. He didn't like rehearsals. He was not into like, you know, like let's figure out our sensory tool. No.
Wow.
You know, I had another friend who she was more of a dancer choreographer, but she loved teaching. She was actually the choreography and sort of breaking things down that she loved the most. And then she created this hugely successful, you know, multiple 6-figure, you know, career where she teaches women entrepreneurial things and style and all these different things. So like, I think that what's so fascinating now is that, again, when I was growing up, it was like, if only be an actor if there's nothing else you want to do and there's nothing else you can do, which is just such an unhealthy attitude. Versus now it's like almost encouraged. Like if you're a multi-hyphenate and actually, like, I don't know, my manager says to me the things that he like, a lot of the things that actually help sell me right now because of the kind of roles I go out for are the fact that I have this philosophy podcast or I just got my master's from Harvard or whatever, because it kind of is the whole picture, you know?
That's what we keep hearing is like diversify for actors, which is...
You have to be able to do other things now. You have to have other life experience, which... they don't talk about that in school. It's the first day of acting school. They say, stand up. Stay standing up if you can do this. Stay standing up if you can do this. Stay standing up if there's anything else that is interesting to you. Okay, everyone who's standing, get out. Like, if there's anything else you could possibly find enjoyment in, get out. Like,
and that is changing.
Yeah.
All we keep hearing is like managers telling actors to diversify or reps.
Else
yeah.
with your extra time.
Why do you want to be an actor?
Me?
Yeah.
It's changed. It's changed over the years.
Okay.
It started because I feel like I didn't get enough attention as a child, and I needed to be adored, and I needed to be in the spotlight. And that's what got me into it and got me through school and got me through the first, what are we on, year 8? Like maybe honestly the first 5 years of trying and working to be an actor, and the marriage that I was like, I can do this. I'm going to be great. I'm going to be in the lights. But I think that I'm starting to realize in my 30s, late 20s, 30s, I have always been really, really interested in what makes people tick. And I think that's, part of being a Libra. I want to know why people think the way they think. And I want to know why people do things like the things they do, which has kept me in relationships for longer than they should, because I'm so interested in why and understanding why, and then working around that why.
Which is the psychology that we're talking about of like why actors should be studying that type of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's almost like Haley's your guinea pig with this holistic actor thing, because
I'm a newly holistic actor, like as of the last year and a half.
Yes, because like, I just wanted to give an example for fun so everyone feels like, they're a part of our circle here, our triangle, is Haley just submitted this self-tape. We won't say much more than that. But what we will say is I think you brought so many new levels to that character and to that tape because of where you are at personally in your life right now.
Thank you. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree 100%. Yeah. It's the reason changing for me has been really huge in the way I enjoy auditions and the things that I'm willing to share in an audition. And I think it's made me a better actor, but it's about why that character does what and I love jumping into a character and figuring out the why for them and who they are, and then being able to like create what I've discovered.
Yeah.
Kind of.
When Haley and I were talking about this audition, I was like, I think the reason it worked so well because as a DP, I see actors all the time in the stuff I shoot, or singers, and there are pieces of performances you pick out where the crew, you can feel that energy just like vibrate because you're like, this is a good moment. And it can be subtle or it can be huge. But what I was saying to Haley was, when she got this amazing email about how wonderful the audition was, I'm trying to be like very discreet, but also give context because I need context in my life. I said to Haley, I think it's because you went in with the approach of, this role was offered to me, even though it wasn't. This role was offered to me. How would I want this role to be shaped? How do I see this role? And I think that's what worked so well, because there was a confidence that you were bringing as yourself into the character and not just verbatim looking at it and being like, okay, here's a little bio. How would I interpret that? And then like, okay, here's the dialogue and like, we're going to read together, but more just like break down all parts of that person. And I think that's why it was so successful.
And I think that comes from the attitude comes from being holistic.
Yeah.
Because I have a lot of other stuff going on now that I'm really excited about.
Yes.
So I can do that, and I can do what feels kind of like dangerous and scary and like crazy and like share so much more, because it's whatever.
It's not like, all on the line because we're diversifying.
We have work we're doing. We're meeting awesome people. There are other things that I'm excited about. And that's, if you're doing what they tell you to do in school, which is like, you need to be spending 8 hours a day being an actor, you're not an actor. You need to be focusing only on acting. Don't get distracted. Don't do anything else. You're too desperate, and you're not having fun, and you care so much about it. Yeah. And you gotta be holistic.
I think that it's like, 8 hours a day on what? Like, it's funny. I kind of ride. Right. I'm kind of a hard ass. I'm like right in the middle of like, I feel like on one hand, actors are the most hardworking, and on the other hand, they can be the most lazy. So what do I mean by that? Of like, and I say they, we can. Like, I have an acting teacher, Tony Greco, who really, when I went back to acting, like I found his class, and he's polarizing, but for me and where I was at, it really resonated. And he'll say, like, would you go to the doctor version of you?
Oh, right. You said this, and I love that.
I think about that all the time. And even if you say, okay, so if doctor feels far away or Laura feels far away, but even if you look at, he'll use the example of like his niece is a violinist and what you need to invest and how much you need to practice. I mean, violins are 6 figures, so there's, or if you were to look at a visual artist or things like that. And so acting is such a weird thing because it's like, it looks like you're doing nothing, and sometimes you are, and sometimes that's what you get directed to do.
Yeah.
And at the same time, like, there's so much, your body, your mind, your emotions are your instrument. Mm-hmm. And so, how you really learn to utilize that instrument. So that's where I feel like there's so many different schools, there's so many different coaches, and people are amazing for different things. But I think that it's really important. I say being like a holistic actor, but in some ways it's more of like a self-aware, except I don't like it's more than just self, it's just an aware actor, I guess, of doing the work of, understanding yourself and your instrument and your, triggers, tools, sentiment, whatever you want to, whatever, modality you use. But then there's also the doing the research of time and place, the dramaturgy, et cetera. That's why I do love, during the pandemic, I really pivoted and was like, what am I going to do? And I was like, I'm going to teach Shakespeare for people that I had a lot of classmates who, because it was a method class and there's people coming from all different backgrounds, a lot of people were really interested in Shakespeare, but had never touched it and were very intimidated by it. And it is hard because that is a modality where it's hard to break into professionally because there is a lot still of like, oh, you don't have that MFA program on your resume, we're not even going to consider you. Like, that is true. At the same time, it's an amazing time where it's become so much more diverse. And they are, open to non-traditional casting, and not just open, but like pursuing that actively. So it's, I just was like, how can I break this down into like 2 hours, of somebody who knows nothing about Shakespeare to learning about it. So I called it like Decoding Shakespeare. And then I'm going to be offering that again. But then I started doing these like Shakespeare power hours. It was like everyone bring a drink, and online, because this sounds like COVID times.
I know. I'm like, what? This is coming back, right?
Yeah, actually,
can I come?
She loves this.
It is, and that's one of the things I will say. I'm very excited about meeting you and meeting Alex and meeting Cody. Is I was. Part of the reason why I never moved back to LA was I had in my head, like, this is what LA was
I
like.
know.
And it's silly because I have friends here and but it's, I do, one of the things that I've like, when it's talking about like know yourself and learn yourself, learn about yourself. I'm very aware. I'm much more attracted to places with beautiful architecture, right? And a history of arts and science, being sort of like the epicenter. So like I love London, and I'm, now that's actually my other coast. But like
we're so excited. We're all going to London.
Hey. Yeah. But all that was a tangent just to say that, the people, it's not about that. You can find people that love Shakespeare. I've actually, like, you and Alex are more into it than most of my friends in New York, for sure.
Funny.
So, yeah. So you never know. Or like I'm writing plays and I'm actually finding more opportunities for doing like public readings and getting it started here. So that's a tangent. But I think that the holistic actor.
Things that you're interested in and that keep you busy other than just serving at a cocktail job or serving at a restaurant and waiting for your reps to send you an audition, which is a lot of what actors think they have to be doing. It's just like, it'll come through. I'll go to class, I'll go to work, and then one day an audition will come through, and then that audition is so important, they panic, and then it's not fun, and they don't want to do the work. But if you're busy doing other things and creating spaces where you can be creative, the audition comes in and you're going to be so stoked to do the work, and then also you can let it go when it's over.
Yeah. Well, and there's even the step before that of like getting the reps and all of that. There's a casting director, Brett Goldstein. She and I became friends. This is how it happens. Like I'll have an audition with somebody and we become friends.
Yeah.
But
that says a lot. I love that.
we ended up co-teaching a class at something called Actors Connection, and it was really about, it's called Drop the Act. It was like how to be yourself in industry or something like that. And
more of that. I think we need to start doing our own version of that. Is it still going on?
That particular one is not, but the other one of the other workshops that I think I'm going to start bringing back is something like connected. It's connected to this idea of emotional intelligence and the emotional intelligent actor. So that was one of the other jobs I've had for many, many years was I would facilitate emotional intelligence workshops for major companies across the globe. And so there was whoa. I know, it was so weird because I was like, I'm an actor and I'd be literally going into like the British Army or like Uber or where, and being like, here's how you guys should be better leaders.
Absolutely.
But there's so much that I learned from that. And so I do think, what is EQ even? And so much of it is around things like self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy. And those are things that on one hand, people that are drawn to acting are really good at and practice at, and another hand are not. So depending on which category.
Spectrum.
So because it's a business, and so it goes back to like there's very little of your time you're actually spent doing the thing that you love. In that, or even like, I write, and I don't know anyone who complains more about what they do than writers. And I get it, because you're saying like, oh, this is so hard. And I was like, there's something wrong with me, because I was like, I can only write first thing in the morning, and I poop out after like 90 minutes, like unless I'm collaborating on something. And I feel like I've run a marathon afterwards. And then I, got my writing degree, got accepted into some writing program things, and it was like, oh, no, everyone has this same thing. And so what they had the same advice. Like that means, well, you're really only writing for 90 minutes a day. So what else are you doing for the rest of your day? Yeah.
Wow. I for a while wanted to become a quantum healer. And
what is your sign again?
Capricorn. Oh, I love it. Yeah, it's like I'm kind of a random Capricorn, I think.
Yeah. You've got a lot of like air.
You do. Wow, you're right.
Yeah, it's a lot of the Aquarius.
I know.
We need to run your whole chart.
Yeah,
I know
your rising and your moon. It's really important. The rising and moon says a lot.
We'll have to do a breakdown later of it. Okay. Live on the podcast tonight.
We get really spiritual.
Yeah. I mean, it's so necessary. But quantum healing, it reminds me so much of what I was reading when I wanted to do that, and then I was like, I'm gonna have to dedicate my life to this, and I'm not prepared for that. Because the whole premise, and this probably with quantum healing, is that you, in order to solve any ailment or disease or anything, the idea is you have to heal all the parts of yourself along with it. So not just doing the one treatment to solve that problem, but also looking into the mind, also looking into what's feeding your soul, also look into what you're eating as a diet. Like the whole you needs to be better while you're trying to solve that problem. And I really love that, because when you're talking about this holistic actor thing, it really is those things. It is like diversifying. It is, what are you doing with your time? How do you understand humanities? Do you understand psychology? Have you traveled? I mean, it's like there's so many things we could say about that, but it's so important. And I think Haley, and you probably are too, your own guinea pig, but I think Haley's a little guinea pig for this, because
I really am, because it's all very new for me. To be healing the whole me and the whole actor. Yeah. It's all at the same time.
Well, I mean, I've been at it for a while, and I will say it's like every day there's still something like, I know, like that.
So something.
So the other interesting thing I think is like, yes to all these things for being an actor. At the same time, you can do none of these things and be a super successful actor.
Yeah.
You can be a super successful actor at 8 months old. And that's where, again, I think it's its own beast. Because being famous is not the same thing as being an actor. Being a celebrity is not the same thing. You can play the same character and like, bless you. Like if that's like your thing, and you're crushing and that's what you enjoy, no problem. So I think that's another thing that feels weird to separate, because it feels almost like haughty to be like, I don't mean like, are you a real actor? Like, what does that mean? I don't know. You're getting it out. Like, so, but I think that if it's something, and this goes back to so much goes back to like your why, and so much, in terms of like, if you're an actor, and these are the kind of actors that I'm always interested in working with. If you're the kind of actor that loves acting and is interested in acting because of what it can offer humanity in terms of like, you're basically living out the philosophical questions. I see a lot of correlations between philosophers and playwrights, for example. And so you're really exploring that so that somebody in the audience goes, oh, you too, I thought I was the only one.
Right.
And so if that's the kind of actor you want to be, then this like, incessant questioning, or like how, Socrates was not well liked because he was called the gadfly, because he was just always asking questions. It was so annoying. But
sounds like me at every party. Literally, they're like, I've been meeting like a lot of new people. We've been meeting a lot of new people recently, like meeting you and stuff. And one person was like this week, I feel like I don't know anything about you. And I'm like, oh, really? Why? And she's like, because you asked me a ton of questions.
You're always asking people questions.
And then you're an enigma. and then you walk away and I realize I have no idea about anything you do. And that's how I got my first Tinder date to cry. As well. So anyway, sorry. Just a fun thing.
No, I mean, that curiosity is just so important. It's going to be so important in any relationship. I mean, when I remember, I don't really go commercially now, but when I had my first commercial agent, it was truly, I had reached a point where I was like, what? I don't care. Like, we'd just gotten a dog. I almost didn't go to the appointment. And he was like, the first thing they always say, so this is something I train actors in, be prepared. They will always say, tell me about yourself, which is like the hardest question.
What do they mean?
Which is something we will be having you do at our workshops coming up, our networking event, community building events, which we're very excited about. Yeah.
Very excited about as well. And so at that time it was like, I just spoke from my heart and what was happening with the dog. And it turned out that person was like a big dog lover and like signed me immediately. Like, I think that there's, it's something really important. Actors will spend so much time being like, what actor do I look like or whatever. And if you don't have an answer to tell me about yourself and, and you're looking for reps, like that is really, really important. And not even just reps, just, anybody, humans in life. I mean, how we met or, all of this for me in so many ways stemmed from when I was a stand-in on set and, being curious, but reading the room because you gotta be careful. Part of your job is to be quiet and out of the way. But like, if you're genuinely interested in how the process works, people will see that and respect that.
What's your tell me about yourself?
Well, so my secret is that I change it based on the circumstance.
Great.
I change it based on who I'm talking to.
Yes.
Because the truth is, it has nothing to do about me. It actually has to do about them.
How you can relate to them, what you're vulnerable with, what
That's
you know
what
they
they're
can feed
looking
off
for.
of. Yeah.
That it's human to want to belong and to want to connect, and you are hardwired to be like, is this person safe or a threat? And so
I think I found my soulmate here. Connecting, networking. Haley knows this. The game of networking and the game of connecting in this industry to have authentic connections begins with how do you tailor what parts of yourself are necessary for the conversation and that connection. I love that.
Especially if you're a multi-hyphenate. And also, it was so funny. I mean, this was definitely trial and error. It's not like I was like, or there was like a course for this or something. I do wonder if a lot of it has to do with like, I was an only child. My parents both worked. I was every 2 weeks in the summer, they would, I would be in a different camp. It was like science camp. And we are the same
only
person.
child. You got the red hair right now. Only child.
Yeah.
Parents working all the time. Did not grow up with a proper diet. Went to summer camps way too much. I get it.
You learn to read the room so fast.
Yes.
And you have to, because otherwise you are truly on your own.
Yeah.
And so I think that that was actually something that my teacher, he spotted in me right away. I think a really good teachers actually teach the individual. And he was like, you walk in and it's a chessboard. You're figuring out how, and that can sound bad. That can make it sound, it's not meant to be manipulative. It's really not like consciously about like a power situation.
It's like a relationship. Like
it's really else. It's relationship, and my relationships are very different. With the different people that I'm.
The information you're sharing with us is different than the information you're sharing with someone else, and like the parts of your personality people bring out. I mean, it's all relevant to how we live our daily lives. We just have to start thinking about it in a professional sense.
It doesn't mean it's not an authentic connection.
No, it doesn't.
Also, it's not that you're walking in and being like, "What does she want to know about?"
No,
and then changing yourself to like fit that. You're
being a little more selfless.
And being like, selfless and being cognizant of what they might be interested in speaking to you about, and then how can you create that authentic connection from that?
Yeah.
And trusting that, like, this is where, I mean, I've gotten more woo in some ways over the years, and like part of it is just like trusting that I don't believe in everything happens for a reason, but like trusting that you can create whatever relationship you want with that person. I don't know. I tend to be more of the existentialist mindset in terms of like existence precedes essence. That's the whole thing that like they kind of came up with. And the idea, it's not that, I'm not like, it's all pointless. God
right.
Said,
nothing
matters. But it's much more of the like, we have a say in it. And at the same time, like you can then apply like the stoicism of like, you can only control what's in your control. So that includes who you meet,
definitely. Absolutely.
Yeah. The magic is that you can create the meaning.
Yeah.